The evening rush had begun, and the street was crowded with people heading home. Seagal walked calmly along the sidewalk, hands in his coat pockets, blending into the noise of the city. He wasn't in a hurry. He rarely was. His eyes scanned the street out of habit, not suspicion, awareness. Then he heard it. A small, trembling voice cut through the traffic and chatter. "Daddy, please help her." Stephen stopped. Across the street, near a dimly lit corner, a young woman stood frozen, clutching a little girl close to her side. Two men blocked their path. One stood too close, invading the woman's space, while the other laughed, clearly enjoying her fear. "Relax," one of them said mockingly. "We're just talking." The woman tried to step away, but they shifted with her, trapping her between them and the wall. The little girl buried her face into the woman's coat, crying softly. People walked past. Some glanced. Most didn't stop. Stephen watched quietly. He didn't rush in. He didn't shout. He observed, the way he always had. The men's posture. Their hands. Their confidence, built on the assumption that no one would interfere. The little girl looked up again, tears in her eyes, and repeated in a breaking voice. "Daddy, please help her." Stephen took a slow breath. He crossed the street. As he approached, one of the men noticed him and smirked. "Mind your business, old man." Stephen stopped a few feet away, his presence calm but unmistakably solid. "It becomes my business," Stephen said evenly, "when someone is afraid." The street seemed to quiet around them. The woman looked at Stephen, hope and fear mixing in her eyes. What Stephen did next would change everything, and by the next day, someone powerful would be searching for the man who refused to look away. The two men laughed when Stephen stopped in front of them. They had no idea who he was. One stepped forward, towering over Stephen. "Mind your business, old man," he sneered. Stephen didn't flinch. His calm, steady gaze met theirs. "I already told you," he said, voice low but firm. "I can't ignore fear when I see it." The woman clutched the little girl closer, whispering reassurances that sounded hollow even to her own ears. The girl's tears didn't stop. "Are you scared?" the taller man mocked, stepping closer. "You think you can stop us?" "I don't need to stop you," Stephen replied evenly. "I just need you to back off." The tension in the air was thick, almost visible. People walking by slowed, sensing the danger. A young man pulled out his phone, pointing it toward the scene, recording silently. Others whispered among themselves. The men noticed the cameras and scoffed. "Look at this fool. Getting recorded doesn't make you brave." Stephen didn't respond to their insults. Instead, he positioned himself subtly between the men and the woman, creating space for her and the little girl to step back. Every movement was controlled, precise, a silent warning. The taller man's smirk faltered for a moment, replaced with curiosity and a flicker of unease. He had clearly underestimated Stephen. "You don't scare us," the second man growled. "Move, or else." Stephen's eyes narrowed. "Or else what? You'll bully a woman and child in front of strangers? That's your threat?" The crowd around them shifted. Some stepped closer, others held their phones high. The energy had changed. People were no longer just watching, they were waiting, holding their breath, sensing that Stephen wasn't an ordinary man. The little girl looked up at him again, hope in her eyes. "Please?" Stephen nodded once, almost imperceptibly. "I've got you." The men laughed nervously, trying to regain control, but their confidence was slipping. Every calm word from Stephen, every measured step he took, was pushing them back without a single punch thrown. "If you saw this happening, would you step in or walk away? Also tell us, which country and city are you watching from?" By the time the men realized Stephen was serious, the tide had already begun to turn. The street that had been filled with fear was now watching in silent awe, waiting to see what would happen next. The two men froze for a moment, sizing Stephen up. Their confidence had faded slightly, but they weren't ready to back down. "You think you can stop us?" the taller one barked, stepping closer. His tone was sharper now, laced with irritation. Stephen stayed calm, his stance firm, his eyes locked on theirs. "I'm not here to fight," he said quietly, "but I will not let you intimidate her." The woman and the little girl clung to each other, trembling. Passers-by had stopped entirely. Phones were out, cameras recording every second. Murmurs spread through the small crowd. Some whispered, "Who is this man?" Others muttered, "He's not afraid at all." The shorter man tried to shove Stephen aside. "Step back, old man, or you'll regret it." Stephen didn't move. Instead, he raised his hands slightly, palms open, a gesture both calm and commanding. I suggest you step back, or this situation will only embarrass you further. The crowd tensed. The air was heavy, every bystander aware that a confrontation could erupt at any second. The little girl looked up again, her tear-streaked face full of hope. "Daddy, please," she whispered. Stephen's jaw tightened ever so slightly. "I've got you," he said softly. His voice carried a quiet strength that made the two men hesitate. The taller man's sneer wavered. His bravado was slipping. He glanced around at the growing crowd and the cameras. The energy had shifted. The street that had once seemed theirs to dominate now felt hostile. You can't just," the shorter man stammered, but no one listened. All eyes were on Stephen. He stepped slightly forward, not aggressively, but enough to signal that he would not be pushed aside. The men instinctively took a step back, sensing the unspoken warning. Every person watching felt the tension, felt the power in calm control. No shouting. No punching. Yet the balance of power had completely changed. Engagement break. Would you risk yourself to protect a stranger like Stephen did? Comment yes if you believe courage is stronger than fear. The woman whispered to Stephen, her voice shaky. "Thank you. I don't know how to repay you." Stephen shook his head. "You don't need to. Just stay safe." Even in this moment of fear and uncertainty, Steven Seagal's quiet courage commanded respect. The men realized they had underestimated him, and for the first time, they weren't sure how this encounter would end. The street had gone quiet. Even the city noises seemed to fade as all eyes fixed on Steven Seagal and the two men. For the first time, the aggressors hesitated. A bystander, a young man holding his phone, finally whispered to his friend, "Wait, isn't that Steven Seagal?" The friend squinted. "No way, it can't be. That's him, right?" Whispers spread quickly through the crowd. "That's Steven Seagal," someone shouted. "The actor. The martial artist." The two men's confidence wavered. They looked at each other nervously, suddenly aware that the man they had been mocking and threatening was not just any stranger. Stephen, however, said nothing. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't flaunt his fame. His focus remained entirely on protecting the woman and the little girl. His calm presence alone was enough to hold the men at bay. The taller man muttered, That's impossible." "Yeah, no way he'd step in like this," the shorter man stammered. Sweat formed along his hairline as the crowd around them began murmuring excitedly. Some people were recording, some simply stared in awe. The little girl peeked around the woman's shoulder, still crying, still scared, but now she had a glimmer of hope. He's helping us," she whispered. Stephen nodded ever so slightly. "I told you I've got you," he said softly. The crowd began to murmur louder. "That's Steven Seagal. He's the real deal." The two men, now aware of who they were dealing with, tried to regain their composure, but the energy had shifted. The street that had once belonged to their intimidation now belonged to the quiet hero standing firm. Stephen kept his eyes on them, unwavering. There was no ego in his stance, no threat beyond the silent strength in his presence. Just protection. Just calm control. One man finally said, voice shaky, "We shouldn't." But before he could finish, Stephen's measured gaze stopped him. The lesson was clear. Power is not about intimidation. It's about courage, control, and standing up for the vulnerable. The crowd felt it too. Phones were raised, whispers spread, and respect rippled across the street. Even the woman and the little girl stood a little taller, knowing they were safe, at least for now. Something was about to change. The two men had underestimated him, and the recognition from the crowd was tipping the balance. The tension was far from over, but the first crack in the aggressor's arrogance had appeared. The taller man's sneer had disappeared. The shorter man fidgeted, glancing at the growing crowd and the recording phones. Their arrogance was fading, replaced by unease. Steven Seagal didn't move closer. He didn't shout. He simply let his presence speak, firm, unwavering, controlled. Then he spoke, his voice calm but commanding, cutting through the murmurs of the crowd. "You have been intimidating a woman and a child," he said evenly. "And for what? To prove your strength? To scare someone smaller than you? That is not strength. That is fear disguised as power." The two men shifted uncomfortably. The taller one tried to retort, Who are you two?" Stephen interrupted him, voice steady, "I am someone who won't ignore injustice. You may think you are in control because no one else intervenes. But doing nothing while someone is afraid does not make you powerful. It makes you weak." The crowd went silent. Even the distant hum of traffic seemed to pause. People watched every word, captivated by the calm authority in Stephen's tone. "You've underestimated me," Stephen continued, his gaze fixed on the aggressors. "Not because of what I can do physically, but because you've assumed no one will stand for the vulnerable. You've assumed that fear will keep them silent. But courage does not shout to be seen. Courage acts when it matters." The shorter man's face flushed. The taller man's hands twitched nervously. The power dynamic had shifted entirely. "Step back," Stephen said, finally, his voice firm but measured. "You are not going to harm them, not today. Not while I am here." The woman and the little girl took a hesitant step back, relief washing over their faces. The crowd murmured in approval, some cheering softly. Cameras captured every second, every subtle motion that showed Stephen's calm control over the dangerous situation. The two men exchanged a glance, realizing they were no longer in command. Their threats had no weight. Every quiet word Stephen had spoken carried authority. Every step he had taken had signaled strength without aggression. Finally, the taller man muttered, "Fine, whatever. Let's go." The shorter man nodded, and the two of them retreated, casting nervous looks over their shoulders at Stephen and the crowd. As they disappeared, the tension dissolved, replaced by awe. The street that had been a stage for intimidation moments ago was now filled with quiet admiration. All because one man refused to let fear rule, one man refused to stay silent in the face of injustice. Just as the two men retreated, a sleek black car pulled up to the curb. The driver stepped out, followed by a sharply dressed man, clearly someone used to authority, someone used to getting answers. The crowd murmured, curious. The woman, still holding her daughter, stiffened. She whispered, "It's him, the CEO, he must have seen what happened." The man approached Stephen directly, his eyes scanning him with recognition and astonishment. "Excuse me," he said firmly, "are you Steven Seagal?" Stephen nodded slightly, keeping his tone calm. "Yes, that's me." The CEO's expression softened with relief and gratitude. "I saw what you just did. You protected my family when no one else would. Thank you." The crowd erupted quietly, or spreading like wildfire. Phones raised even higher, whispers turning into exclamations. "It's him. The CEO is thanking Steven Seagal." The two men who had caused all the trouble now looked small, humbled, their arrogance gone. One of them muttered under his breath, "I can't believe we messed with him." Stephen, however, didn't boast. He didn't gloat. He simply glanced at the woman and child, then back at the CEO. "I didn't do it for thanks or recognition. I did it because it was the right thing to do." The CEO nodded, clearly impressed. "And that's exactly why I want to find a way to thank you properly." Stephen shook his head. "No need. I don't want anything. Just make sure people understand, courage and respect matter more than rewards." The crowd around them recorded every word, every gesture. The story was already viral before anyone realized it, people drawn not to fame, but to integrity and quiet strength. The woman's voice trembled as she said, I don't know how to repay you. You saved us." Stephen smiled faintly. "You don't owe me anything. Just remember this, help those in need when you can, stand for the vulnerable, and don't let fear guide your actions." The CEO extended his hand once more, this time in pure gratitude. Stephen shook it briefly, nodded, and stepped back, blending into the crowd once again. The street that had been tense and threatening just minutes ago was now buzzing with respect and admiration. Everyone present had witnessed more than a rescue. They had seen courage, integrity, and the true power of calm strength in action. If you believe respect and courage should always come first, type respect in the comments. By the next morning, the story of Steven Seagal's courage had gone viral. Videos recorded by the bystanders flooded social media. Every platform was alive with clips of the incident, Steven calmly confronting the two men, positioning himself to protect the woman and her daughter, and speaking with quiet authority that silenced the aggressors. Comments poured in from around the world. People praised Steven not for his fame, not for his martial arts skills, but for his courage, humility, and integrity. This is what a real hero looks like. No fame, no ego, just strength and heart. Imagine having that calm confidence in the face of fear. Amazing. Meanwhile, the CEO who had witnessed Steven's bravery personally reached out. He publicly thanked Steven and offered him a reward, a partnership, even a position of influence. But Steven politely declined. Money, recognition, and prestige were meaningless to him compared to doing the right thing. "I didn't do it for thanks," Steven told the CEO. "I did it because it was the right thing to do." Courage isn't measured by applause. Strength isn't proven by intimidation. It's measured by standing up for those who cannot stand for themselves. News outlets picked up the story. Headlines praised Stephen as a real-life hero, emphasizing how humility and justice can outshine fame or power. People shared the footage, inspiring discussions about standing up for others, protecting the vulnerable, and challenging abuse of authority. The two men who had harassed the woman were now publicly embarrassed. Their actions were documented, and they faced consequences for their behavior. But Stephen never gloated. He didn't humiliate them. Instead, he let the lesson speak for itself. Real strength is calm, deliberate, and protective, not loud or cruel. The little girl and her mother shared their gratitude, forever changed by the courage of a stranger who didn't hesitate to protect them. The crowd that witnessed the event in person shared their awe on social media, further spreading the story. In the days and weeks that followed, Stephen's message resonated far beyond the city streets. It became a lesson for everyone. Stand up for the vulnerable, even when it's inconvenient. True courage is quiet and purposeful, not for show. Respect, integrity, and compassion are more powerful than intimidation or fame. The world watched, learned, and was reminded that heroes don't always wear capes. Sometimes they walk quietly into danger, protect the innocent, and leave without expecting recognition. If you believe courage and respect matter more than fame or money, type respect in the comments, and subscribe for more inspiring stories like this one.